One of the big hot button topics for several Canadians in 2022 was the rising cost of living and inflation. The Bank of Canada also increased its key lending rate yet again, the seventh time this year, which is now at 4.25%. This will make things even tougher for those who need to borrow. Now, to talk about some of the biggest issues that have impacted Canadians and Albertans over the past year, we're pleased to welcome back Lethbridge MP and Shadow Minister for Canadian Heritage, Rachael Thomas, joining us from Lethbridge. Rachael, welcome back to BCN.
Hi, Hal. Thank you so much. Nice to be here with you.
Now, this has been such a tough year for so many of us. What kind of pressure are the Conservatives putting on the Trudeau Liberals to help make life more affordable for us as we head into 2023?
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate the question. I'm hearing from Canadians, and in particular, those who call Lethbridge home. I'm hearing from so many of them that they're having a really difficult time making ends meet. I've spoken with a couple of individuals actually who have had to move out of their homes. One who's now living in their RV, and another couple that is actually living in their car,
Wow.
because they just were not able to make their rent payments, and ultimately, had to make that decision. And so life is very, very difficult. I recently had a conversation with a senior woman who has her thermostat turned down to 17 and just wears multiple sweaters because she's afraid that she won't be able to pay her heating bill. And so this is reality. We have the highest rate of inflation in 40 years in this country. We know that about half of all Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. We know that 20% of Canadians are choosing to skip meals in order to try to make ends meet. In a single month, 1.5 million Canadians visited a food bank. Uh, this is reality. And so, Canadians are having a hard time being able to just put fuel in their vehicles so they can drive to work or heat their homes because, let's face it, it's Canada and they need to be able to, or, to be able to put groceries on their table so that they can feed their families. Ultimately, we've had two requests for the Liberals all along. And those two requests have been this: stop the new spending because it's driving up inflation, and no new taxes. Axe the tax. And in particular, of course, the carbon tax is set to triple in the next few years. And we
Wow.
know that that has a massively detrimental impact on the Canadian public, on those that are working hard to, just make ends meet. And so we're wanting to advocate on their behalf. And so ultimately, those are our two demands.
So if the Conservative Party of Canada was in power right now, outside of, not increasing taxes, maybe turfing the carbon tax altogether, rein in the, all of the spending, of course, as well, how would you help seniors? Because we speak to a lot of seniors at Bridge City News who are choosing between medication and food.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you're bringing that up because there's two groups in particular that have my heart, and that is those that are seniors who are living on a fixed income, and those who have a disability who are usually living on a small government stipend, which is also fixed. And so these individuals are, still bringing in the same monthly dollar amount, let's say, as they were a year ago, but their cost of living has shot up by 10, 15, even 20%. And so they're having to make dollars stretch further. And so, yes, I'm speaking to constituents who are making the choice between prescription medication or food on the table. That is not a choice Canadians should have to make. And this is nothing but a government induced problem. And so, hell, the truth is we've given our game plan to the Liberals. We've given it to them. Stop the new spending and axe the taxes. That's what we've asked for. In the same way that we've asked for that, that's what our game plan would be if we were to form government. We know that new spending is what drives up inflation. You can't print cash and put it in the economy without there being a negative effect. And in addition to that, when you tax Canadians, it means that they're giving more money to the government and having less money to keep for themselves and steward for their families' needs. And so these two changes need to happen immediately.
Now, the Trudeau Liberals have always said the polluting should not be free, hence the big reason why we have the carbon tax, and like you said, that'll be tripling. Now, you represent a rural riding here in southwestern Alberta. Let's discuss for a moment the impact this levy, the carbon tax, has on our farmers and ranchers and how it'll be going up again next year.
Mhm. Yeah, so I appreciate this phrase that the Liberals like to use, that pollution shouldn't be free. They're putting a cost on it. Well, it's interesting and quite ironic coming from the Liberal government that has no problem putting the Prime Minister on a private jet plane all over the world. You can have dozens of ministers fly all over the world to go to these various environmental conferences in order to tout their line. But at the end of the day, the amount of pollution just in that far exceeds, what our farmers do, especially when you take into account the fact that our farmers are actually carbon sequesterers. I mean, these are the individuals who are the original environmentalists of the planet. They know what it is to look after the soil. They know what it is to steward the water. They know what it is to want good air quality because these are the ingredients that make for good farming, and good farming equates to a living wage. So when farmers don't take care of the environment, it actually penalizes them. So of course it's in their best interest, and of course they're actively doing that. In fact, I think the Liberal government could perhaps learn a lot from them, and maybe should spend some time on their operations, gleaning from their incredible wisdom. I mean, at the end of the day, hell, these are heroes. These are heroes, but unfortunately, this government is demonizing them. They're wanting to penalize them. But they're the individuals who are growing food not only for Canada, but for the entire world. And it's always important, but it's especially important now when you have the war in Ukraine going on, which is the breadbasket of Europe, and Ukraine is no longer able to produce food the way it once did. Canada should be stepping up, not stepping back, which means that we need the government to get on board and actually support our producers rather than act against them.
A recent report by the Auditor General said Ottawa spent way too much on vaccines, Rachel, many of which are allegedly going to waste. The report also said that several ineligible Canadians received CERB or other financial support during the COVID-19 pandemic. There was also $28 billion in suspicious expenses. What are your thoughts on the Auditor General's report?
Yeah, so the auditor general came out with her report, a number of days ago now, and I think there's a couple of things there that I wish to draw attention to. No doubt, what would be characteristic of this report is that the government has engaged in wasteful spending and mismanagement, which is par for the course. That's very characteristic of the Liberals. But I want to highlight this as well, that it wasn't just $28 billion in suspicious spending, but that's on top of an already confirmed $4 billion that was given away in illegitimate benefits. So we don't know. Did that go to friends? Did that go to family? Like, where did that $4 billion in illegitimate spending go? And then plus you add that to the 28, that equals a total of $32 billion in suspicious or altogether illegitimate spending. And you know what is when we brought this up in the House of Commons and we were asking the minister about this, he had the gall to attack the Auditor General for this report and said that it was skewed, said that it was somehow, skewed or tainted in favor of the Conservatives and against the Liberals. Well, that's awfully that's an awful attack to make because the Auditor General was actually appointed by the Liberal government. Let's start there. But we have every reason to believe that she does act in a nonpartisan capacity as she is meant to. And so really what we're seeing is that the Liberals are just simply trying to deflect and attack in order to avoid accountability. And it's wrong. Ultimately, Canadians do deserve an answer with regards to this wasteful spending, or entirely, or entirely mismanaged procurement process in addition to the bad spending.
Rachel, a number of Canadians are outraged at the Trudeau Liberals' gun ban bill C-21. Now, apparently, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the bill will not include hunting rifles such as shotguns. What are you hearing on the Hill?
Well, it's laughable how, this is terrible. This is absolutely terrible. There's no doubt about it that Bill C-21 and the amendment that has been brought forward is absolutely an attack on hunters. We are talking about law-abiding citizens who responsibly use their firearm, those who use it for hunting or maybe sport shooting or to protect livestock on a farm. These are the individuals who are minding their own business, participating in a cultural event called hunting, providing for their families often through that means. And so, this legislation that the Liberals have brought forward, along with the amendment that they've added to it now, will actually outlaw, for sure over 1,000 hunting rifles and counting. And we're talking about classic hunting rifles. We're talking about lever actions for crying out loud. We're not talking about firearms of war. And so let's be really clear here. Let's be really realistic. And at the end of the day, what's very evident is that the Liberals are very interested in playing politics and going after those law abiding citizens who are using their rifles for good purposes. And they're doing it in the name of supposed safety. But what I find interesting and what Canadians find, I think appalling when I talk to them is that the government is claiming to do this in the name of, keeping our communities safe. But at the same time, the Liberals are doing nothing to take gangs off the streets, and they're doing nothing to shut down illegal gun smuggling across the US border. And so until the Liberals actually take real action with regard to making Canada safe, I don't believe Canadians should believe a word they say.
You know, Rachel, we've spoken to a number of Indigenous peoples as well who are not happy with Bill C-21, the gun ban bill. Now, as you know, we have one of the largest reserves out our front door with the Blood Tribe or the Blackfoot Confederacy. Is the federal government, in your opinion, doing enough as we work towards reconciliation? Perhaps even, let's not even talk about C-21, but maybe talk about clean drinking water on many of our reserves across the nation.
Mhm. Well, certainly we live by, one of the largest reserves in the country, and I've had the opportunity to have many meaningful conversations with Indigenous folks in the area. And when I talk to them about reconciliation and I ask them about what's most important, the thing that has come back to me is relationship. They're wanting to be seen, they're wanting to be heard, they're wanting to be understood, and ultimately they're wanting to build relationship that is grounded on trust. And so, knowing that, I think the government has an opportunity then to proceed on that footing. But unfortunately, what I see instead is that the Liberals like to talk a lot about the different actions that they're going to take. But then there's actually very little follow through. And so, yes, clean drinking water, that would be one example where there have been numerous promises made over the duration of this government, but again, no follow through. But another example would be economic reconciliation. Again, when I talk to Indigenous folks, this is very important to them. They want to be able to provide for themselves. They want to be able to participate in the economy in the same way that all of us want to be able to. And so, when the government comes out with bills like C-48 or C-69 that shut down the energy industry, that hurts Indigenous communities in a big way. And so, if we're going to talk realistically about reconciliation, we have to look for those ways of being able to give Indigenous folks the opportunity to further themselves financially and to really be able to make a go of it. And certainly, this government has done nothing to that end.
Rachel, Canadian Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez says that Bill C-11 would provide levers to press social media providers to tweak algorithms to comply with government regulation. Now, you're taking issue with that. Can you explain why? What are some of your main concerns?
Mhm. Bill C-11 is probably one of the worst pieces of legislation that I have ever seen in the House of Commons. It is censorship legislation through and through. The government will be dictating to social media companies what algorithms they should be using with regard to material and how to bump it up or down in the queue. In other words, make it discoverable or make it go away. Ultimately, this comes down to control. It comes down to control of what Canadians can post online, what they can see online, what they can say online, what they can hear online. It likens us to countries like North Korea or China. We don't want to become that. And so I am doing everything I can to fight against this legislation. It's currently in the Senate, and Senator Housakos has done an incredible job chairing the committee where this bill is being explored. Many witnesses came forward and testified there, which I am very thankful for because those voices had previously been ignored by the government. And what we heard during that Senate hearing over and over and over again is that this bill is a terrible piece of legislation, not only for digital first creators, those who exist online, but for Canadians in general. And so when it comes back to the House of Commons, we suppose that will happen in mid-February. I will be doing everything I can, along with my colleagues, to fight this legislation and hopefully successfully prevent it from being able to go through.
Now, we only have a couple of short moments left here, but I wanted to ask you about rumors of potential rumblings that we could see a spring election. What are you hearing, and is your party prepared?
Well, I think anytime we have a minority government in place, there's always going to be rumblings about an election coming up. And who knows? Certainly, that could be the case. We're not entirely sure. We have no guarantees of when the election might be, but I can tell you this. I can tell you that under our new leader, Pierre Poilievre, we are united, we are strong, we have a vision for Canada. And we are looking forward to the next election and forming government so that we can undo the damage that has been done and build a vibrant future where Canadians are given back control of their life and we're making Canada the freest country on the planet.
Lethbridge MP and Shadow Minister for Canadian Heritage, Rachael Thomas, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Hal.